Lightning shattered the sky like broken glass, illuminating the landscape in violent bursts. Rain hadn't yet fallen, but the air crackled with electric tension, nature's fury matching the mob that approached Mary Caldwell's isolated cabin. Mary pressed against the rough-hewn logs of her home, one hand protectively covering her swollen belly. 6 months along now, the child within kicked frantically, sensing her terror. Her other hand clutched Thomas's final gift, a tiny, carved wooden cradle small enough to fit in her palm. "For our little miracle," he'd whispered the morning before the mine collapse. The memory lanced through her heart like a physical wound. "Please," she gasped, voice barely audible above the rising wind. "I've done nothing wrong." The torches appeared first, a dozen flickering flames, weaving through darkness, illuminating faces contorted by fear and hatred. Neighbors, patients she'd healed. People who'd smiled at her wedding offered condolences after Thomas died. Now their eyes held no recognition, just cold condemnation. At their head strode Reverend Thaddeus Ward, his tall frame made imposing by his black coat flapping like crow's wings. Beside him walked his wife Viola, her pinched face alive with something that froze Mary's blood triumph. Mary Caldwell, the reverend intoned voice carrying like a funeral bell. "You have brought wickedness upon this town. The devil works through your hands." Jacob Miller pushed forward, twisting his hat nervously. "Now hold on, Reverend. Maybe we ought to think this through. Her remedies saved my Jenny last winter." "Or silence," Reverend Ward thundered. "Have you forgotten your calf, Miller? The blood seeping from its eyes, the unnatural way it twisted before death." Miller looked away, but doubt lingered in his weathered face. "I only use herbs God created." Mary pleated auburn hair, whipping in the gusting wind. "Simple remedies my grandmother taught. Andukar herbs picked under moonlight with strange songs on your lips." Viola interrupted, stepping forward. Her words dripped venom, sweetened with false piety. "We've all seen you skulking through the woods at unholy hours. Tell me, Mary, was Thomas's death part of your dark covenant? Did you sacrifice him for power?" The accusation struck Mary like a physical blow. Unbidden, a memory surfaced Thomas's blood-flecked lips, forming her name, his calloused hand squeezing hers before going limp. The copper scent of blood and rock dust. His fading eyes still filled with love as he whispered, "Take care of our little one. Promise me they'll know who their father was." "How dare you?" Mary hissed, fury momentarily burning through fear. "I loved him more than my own life." From the crowd, Sarah Jensen stepped forward hesitantly. "Mrs. Ward, perhaps we're being hasty. Mary's tinctures saved my Jenny. And have you noticed how strange Jenny's been since?" Viola cut in sharply. "How she speaks of dreams where she flies, how animals follow her now." Her voice rose, commanding the crowd's attention. "That's how corruption begins. Small enchantments to win trust, then deeper darkness follows." Sarah retreated, clutching her shawl tighter, doubt clouding her eyes. Mrs. Fletcher, the elderly schoolteacher, pushed through the throng. "This is outrageous. Since when do we in Clearwater Creek condemn pregnant women without evidence? Where's your Christian charity?" "Careful, Abigail." Viola warned, voice honeyed poison. "Your fondness for the accused marks you for scrutiny as well." "Is that a threat, Viola Ward?" Mrs. Fletcher drew herself up undaunted. "I've known you since you were soiling your diapers. Don't think your husband's collar gives you authority over truth or decency." The Reverend stepped between them. "Enough. Mary Caldwell will have her trial as God demands. But she'll await it secure, where her powers can't harm others." "Explain the dead livestock," Viola demanded, turning back to Mary. "Explain why 3 of Harmon's sheep dropped dead after drinking from the stream that passes your property. Explain the symbols carved into trees along that same stream. I don't know about any dead animals. Mary insisted, confusion genuine. The marks on the trees are trail signs Thomas taught me to find my way and mark where certain herbs grow. Lies, Viola spat. Show them what we found, husband. The Reverend produced a small cloth bag that Mary had never seen before, hidden beneath your floorboards. That's not mine. Mary whispered, a chill running down her spine. Seize her, the Reverend commanded. William Parker from the general store and Gerald Thompson, the wealthy ranchers, lunged forward. Mary tried to flee inside, but her pregnant state made her clumsy. Rough hands grabbed her arms, yanking so violently that pain shot through her abdomen. My baby. She cried out, tears streaming. Whatever you think I've done, my child is innocent. For a heartbeat, uncertainty flashed across several faces. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Stop this madness, Mrs. Fletcher commanded. She's with child, for God's sake. Take the old woman, too, Viola instructed coldly. She's clearly under the witch's influence. Two men hesitated, then moved toward Mrs. Fletcher, who stood her ground defiantly. Touch me, Samuel Dixon, and I'll remind this town how I switched your backside for stealing apples 15 years ago, she warned. The man halted, flushing red. They dragged Mary toward a wooden cart as Mrs. Fletcher called after her. I'll come for you, Mary. Don't lose heart. As they lifted her roughly onto the hard planks, Mary's gaze caught something at the forest's edge. A shadowy figure unnaturally still. A woman with copper skin and eyes that reflected the lightning like a wolf's. When the next flash came, she had vanished. The cart lurched forward, wheels grinding through mud. Each jolt sent pain stabbing through Mary's womb. The baby kicked frantically, as if protesting this rough treatment. Please, she begged Henry Simmons, the blacksmith driving the cart. Slow down, it's hurting the baby. Simmons glanced back, conflict evident on his broad face. He slowed the horses slightly, earning a sharp look from Reverend Ward, who rode alongside. A strange mist began rising from the ground, despite the storm wind's thick white tendrils curling around the cart wheels, obscuring the road ahead. Several townsfolk crossed themselves nervously. My witch's fog, someone muttered. She calls it now to escape justice. As they approached town, Mary's attention was drawn upward by movement. A large hawk circled directly overhead, eyes fixed on the procession despite the brewing storm. Its presence felt significant, though she couldn't explain why. The church loomed ahead, its white steeple piercing the tumultuous sky. The cart veered toward a small stone structure attached to its side, a root cellar dug into the hillside. The heavy wooden door was thrown open, revealing stone steps leading down into absolute darkness. No, Mary gasped, terror gripping her. Since Thomas's death in the mine collapse, enclosed underground spaces triggered blinding panic. Please, not there, I can't breathe underground. A convenient fear for a witch who claims innocence, Viola remarked coldly. Perhaps your dark master doesn't reach into consecrated ground, Gerald Thompson frowned. The cellar is damp and cold, Reverend. In her condition is precisely why we must be cautious, the Reverend replied. If what she carries is natural, God will protect it. If not, Mary struggled wildly as they dragged her down the steps, fighting with maternal desperation. My baby is Thomas's child. Would you kill an innocent because of your superstitions? Her outburst earned a vicious slap from Viola that sent her reeling. Speak not of innocence with your lying tongue, the woman hissed, voice dropping to a whisper only Mary could hear. I've waited too long to see you suffer. The cellar was a nightmare, stone walls weeping moisture, a dirt floor, and ceiling beams low enough that the taller men ducked. A single lantern cast weak light over barrels of preserved foods, gardening tools, and in the far corner, a rusted iron cage once used to transport livestock. Henry Simmons lit a second lantern before they thrust her into the cage. The lock clicked shut with terrible finality. Reverend Ward approached lantern held high. "You will remain here until your questioning. I suggest you use this time to prepare your confession." "I need water," Mary said, fighting to maintain composure. "And something to sit on, please." Gerald Thompson nodded to Simmons, who retrieved a wooden bucket of water and a threadbare blanket. They passed these through the bars without meeting her eyes. As they turned to leave, Mary called out desperately, "The child I carry is innocent. Whatever you believe of me, remember that." At the top of the stairs, Reverend Ward paused. For a moment, something like doubt crossed his face. Then Viola's hand settled on his arm, and his expression hardened once more. "Pray, Mary Caldwell," he said finally. "Pray that God shows you the path to redemption." The door slammed shut, plunging her into near total darkness. Mary sank onto the dirt floor, the thin blanket providing little comfort against the cold, damp earth. Her hands cradled her belly where the baby had gone frighteningly still. "It's all right, little one," she whispered, voice breaking. "Mama will protect you. Somehow I'll protect you." As if in response, the baby stirred a weak movement, but present. Mary closed her eyes, drawing strength from that small sign of life. Outside, thunder cracked overhead. With such force the ground itself trembled. The strange mist thickened around the church, swirling in patterns no natural fog would form. Deep in the forest beyond town, the woman with reflective eyes knelt beside a small fire, sheltered beneath an overhanging rock. She cast herbs into the flames, which flared blue-green, as she chanted in a language no settler would recognize. The woman White Fawn closed her eyes, sending her spirit forth to walk in the dreams of others seeking allies for what was to come. The wheels of destiny had begun to turn, and neither Clearwater Creek nor Mary Caldwell would ever be the same. The first night in the cellar stretched eternal. Every sound jolted Mary awake, water dripping in rhythmic, maddening cadence, rats scurrying in corners, their eyes gleaming like malevolent stars in the dying lantern light. Worse than these physical torments was the claustrophobic terror that clutched at her throat. The darkness, the close stone walls, the earthy smell all mirrored Thomas's final resting place. Had he felt this same panic, this helplessness? "I'm sorry," she whispered to his memory. "I should have heeded those dreams." The dreams she hadn't told her accusers about, the nightmares that had plagued her for weeks before Thomas's death. Visions of darkness closing in, of being trapped beneath the earth. She dismissed them as pregnancy fears, but now wondered if they had been warnings. By morning, her throat was parched, her lips cracked. The water they'd provided was gone, and a hacking cough tore at her chest with each breath of the damp, moldy air. When the door finally opened, the sudden brightness stabbed at her eyes. Mary shielded her face with one hand, squinting up at the silhouettes descending the stairs. Reverend Ward led the procession, followed by the town council members, Henry Simmons, William Parker, and Gerald Thompson. Behind them came Viola, her thin lips curved in a smile that chilled Mary's blood. Mary Caldwell," the Reverend intoned, setting a lantern on a barrel. "Are you prepared to confess your sins and seek God's mercy?" Mary struggled to her feet, one hand braced against the cage bars for support. "I have nothing to confess, Reverend. I am innocent of any wrongdoing." The men exchanged glances. Henry Simmons shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe she's telling the truth, Reverend. My Emma swears by Mary's headache tonic. Nothing devilish about that. And gave her influence over your household." Viola cut in sharply. "Have you noticed your daughter's sudden interest in collecting strange plants? How your livestock falls ill while others thrive?" Mary stared at Viola, sudden understanding dawning. This wasn't about witchcraft, not really. This was personal. But why? What had Mary ever done to earn such hatred? "My remedies are just herbs and honey," Mary said firmly, voice raspy from thirst. "Nothing more. Solomon himself praised hyssop and myrrh in Scripture. Was he practicing witchcraft too? Do not blaspheme by comparing your dark arts to biblical wisdom, the Reverend snapped. Gentlemen, search this cellar again. Look for any sign we might have missed. As they spread out examining the storage room's corners, Mary addressed Gerald Thompson directly. Mr. Thompson, please. You've known me since I arrived. Have I ever brought harm to anyone? Thompson avoided her gaze. Can't say as you have, Mary. But these dead animals, they ain't natural deaths. From the far corner, William Parker called out, There's nothing here but church supplies and... He paused, reaching behind a barrel. Wait, what's this? Parker approached, holding a crude doll fashioned from twisted grasses and twine. A scrap of fabric one Mary recognized from her own mended dress was tied around its middle. That's not mine, she protested, bewildered. I've never seen it before. And yet it bears your clothing, Reverend Ward said gravely, and was hidden in this very cellar where you now stand. Mary nearly laughed despite her situation. How could I have hidden it? Here I was brought here against my will just last night. Henry Simmons cleared his throat. She makes a point, Reverend. Don't make sense that. Evil confounds sense, Simmons. The Reverend interrupted. That is its power. William Parker examined the doll more closely. These knots are fresh. The grass hasn't even started to wilt yet. Are you suggesting someone planted this evidence? Gerald Thompson asked, stroking his beard thoughtfully. I'm merely observing facts, Parker replied cautiously. As a merchant, I notice details. Mary sensed a slight shift in the atmosphere. Even Thompson now looked less certain of her guilt. Viola must have sensed it too. What of the preposterous explanation for the symbols carved in trees' trail markers? Who taught you such woodcraft, Mary? Certainly not your husband. Thomas was a miner, not a trapper. The question struck Mary oddly. How did Viola know Thomas hadn't been a trapper? Mary had rarely spoken of their life before Clearwater Creek. Thomas worked many jobs before settling here, Mary replied carefully. He learned tracking from a Shoshone guide during his time with the survey company. Something flickered in Viola's eyes, recognition. How convenient that the dead can't confirm your tales. Enough questions for now, Reverend Ward declared abruptly. The accused needs time to reflect. He gestured to Henry Simmons. Bring water. Even a sinner requires sustenance for proper confession. As they filed out, Viola lingered behind. When the men had disappeared up the stairs, she stepped close to the cage, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You don't remember me, do you? She asked, eyes glittering with malice. But I remember you, Mary Evans. Your father's farm bordered my father's land in Ohio. Your mother treated my mother's consumption and killed her with your family's remedies. Mary recoiled in shock. Evans, that's not my maiden name. You're mistaking me for... No mistake, Viola hissed. You were younger then, but those green eyes don't change. Your mother escaped, justice died before they could hang her. But you won't be so fortunate. You're mad, Mary whispered, truly frightened now. My mother died of influenza in Pennsylvania. I've never lived in Ohio. Lies. Viola's face contorted with rage. I've waited 15 years to find you. When Thomas brought you here, I couldn't believe my fortune. Then watching you gain influence, win people's trust with the same potions and plants, I wouldn't let history repeat itself. Horrified understanding dawned. The livestock, you poisoned them. Viola's smile was terrible. The stream made it simple. A few dead animals. Some strange marks carved at night. The right whispers in the right ears. And Thomas. Mary's voice shook. His death. A necessary adjustment. He was becoming too respected, asking uncomfortable questions about the mine's ownership. Viola's eyes gleamed. It's remarkable what men will do for a woman who understands their baser needs, especially men who oversee mine safety inspections. Mary lunged at the bar's nails, clawing for Viola's face. You murdered him. Viola stepped back just in time, laughing softly. Such unladylike behavior only confirms their suspicions about you. Her voice hardened. Even if I have to burn this cellar down around you, I'll see you pay for my mother's suffering. With that chilling promise, she ascended the stairs, skirts swishing self-importantly. Mary sank to the floor, mind reeling. Viola was clearly delusional, confusing her with someone else nursing a decades-old grievance against the wrong person. Yet this madness had claimed Thomas's life, and now threatened her baby's. As darkness fell once more, Mary huddled in her cage, shivering with cold and fear. Sleep came in fitful bursts, dreams tangling with reality. In one such dream state, a woman materialized before her, copper-skinned, with obsidian eyes, dressed in a mixture of settler clothing and native garments. Be not afraid. The woman said, her voice carrying an accent Mary couldn't place. I am White Fawn. The spirits have connected our paths. Are you real? Mary asked, uncertain if this was hallucination born of desperation. White Fawn knelt beside the cage, her form both solid and ethereal simultaneously. As real as your pain, as real as your child's heartbeat. I have walked in your dreams these past nights, learning your truth. You were at the forest's edge, Mary realized. And the hawk following the cart. My spirit takes many forms when needed. White Fawn confirmed. Listen carefully, for time grows short. The woman who hates you has poisoned the elder who would speak for you. Mrs. Fletcher. Mary gasped. Is she? Lives still but weakens. The poison works slowly, meant to silence her before your trial. White Fawn's eyes grew distant, seeing beyond physical reality. More deaths will come unless the truth is revealed. The stream carries death, meant to be blamed on you. Viola is mad, Mary whispered. She believes I'm someone else, someone whose mother supposedly killed hers years ago in Ohio. Madness mixed with evil purpose is most dangerous. White Fawn replied grimly. She plans water trial for you tomorrow. Council divided, but she pushes husband to act quickly before others discover poisoned stream. Water trial. Mary's blood ran cold. The infamous test for witches, drowning as proof of innocence, floating as proof of guilt. Either way, death. Listen carefully. White Fawn reached through the bars, impossibly, her hand passing like mist to touch Mary's cheek. When they bring you to water, do not fight. Take these herbs when next they bring water. She pressed something into Mary's palm. They will slow your heart, make you appear as one dead. And then, Mary asked, hope and fear warring within her. Then we flee. My people wait beyond the settlement. White Fawn began to fade. I must go. Maintaining this form drains my strength. Remember, trust and breathe, not until you are alone. Mary jerked awake to footsteps above. She uncurled her fist, expecting to find it empty, but there, nestled in her palm, lay 3 small leaves she recognized as foxglove, known to affect the heart's rhythm. The dream had been real. She quickly hid the leaves in her bodice as the cellar door opened, admitting weak morning light. But Mary Caldwell. Reverend Ward intoned solemnly. The council remains divided on your guilt. Therefore, you will face God's judgment directly through the trial by water at noon today. Mary's heart hammered against her ribs. The plan White Fawn had foretold was unfolding exactly. May I have some water before then? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. And bread, if possible, for my child's sake. The Reverend hesitated, then nodded to Henry Simmons, who returned with water and bread. Mary accepted them with trembling hands. As the men conferred among themselves, she crumbled the foxglove leaves into the water, watching them dissolve. Closing her eyes briefly in prayer for strength for her child's safety, she raised the cup to her lips and drank. A solemn procession wound from the church to Clearwater Creek. Mary stumbled between two men who held her arms firmly, her bound hands resting on her belly. The entire town had gathered faces ranging from righteous anticipation to horror. The creek ran deep and cold, fed by mountain snowmelt. Its normally clear waters were strangely murky today, churning ominously around the wooden platform constructed overnight. Mary searched for White Fawn, but saw only hostile faces. Had the plan changed? Already she felt the herbs affect a strange lethargy spreading through her limbs, her heartbeat slowing perceptibly. The baby moved sluggishly, concerning her deeply. White Fawn had said nothing about risk to the child. Lord, protect my baby. She prayed silently. Whatever happens to me, spare my innocent child. Reverend Ward addressed the townsfolk. We come to seek God's judgment where human wisdom has failed. Mary Caldwell stands accused of witchcraft in Congress with dark forces. Wait. Jacob Miller pushed through the crowd, face flushed with exertion. The water, something's wrong with it. All heads turned toward him. My daughter went to the creek this morning, Miller explained breathlessly. Found dead fish everywhere upstream. The water's been poisoned. Murmurs erupted through the crowd. Viola stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. More evidence of her evil. She curses the very waters meant to judge her. That makes no sense. Sarah Jensen objected. Why would she poison the water she's to be tested in? To avoid judgment. Viola insisted shrilly. To corrupt God's test. What if someone else poisoned it? William Parker suggested. To frame her, Viola whirled on him. Who would do such a thing? Who benefits from dead livestock and poisoned water? Perhaps someone who owns competing land. Gerald Thompson mused. Mary's property borders the southern mining claims, does it not? Viola's face whitened, then flushed crimson. How dare you imply? I imply nothing, Thompson interrupted. I merely consider all possibilities as any fair-minded person would. Enough! Reverend Ward shouted. The trial proceeds as planned. If the accused has tampered with these waters, God will know and judge accordingly. Two men helped Mary onto the platform. Her legs were bound together, then a rope tied around her waist, the end held by men on shore. The final indignity was a cloth tied over her eyes, plunging her into darkness. Then may God have mercy on your soul, the Reverend intoned. Hands pushed her forward. Mary felt herself falling. And then came the shocking cold as water enveloped her. The weight of her sodden dress dragged her down immediately. Instinct screamed at her to fight, but White Fawn's instructions echoed trust. Breathe not. Mary forced herself to go limp, allowing the water to claim her. Her lungs burned with the need for air. The baby inside her kicked frantically, sensing her distress. Panic clawed at her mind. What if this was a mistake? What if White Fawn's plan failed? Just when she thought she could hold her breath no longer, a strange calm began to spread through her limbs. Her heartbeat slowed further. The burning in her lungs subsided to a distant discomfort. The herbs were working. Consciousness began to blur at the edges. Above her, distorted by water and blindfold shapes moved on the shore. Muffled shouts reached her. Then came the tug of the rope around her waist as they pulled her in. Air hit her face as they dragged her onto the bank. But Mary remembered White Fawn's warning. She kept her body limp, her chest still, though every fiber of her being cried out for breath. She's not breathing. Jacob Miller's shouted voice, thick with distress. Hands pressed on her chest, trying to expel water from her lungs. The pressure was agonizing on her pregnant belly, but she remained still, fighting her body's instinct to cough. "Is she?" Sarah Jensen asked fearfully. "Dead," came Gerald Thompson's grim reply. "God has rendered judgment." A confused mixture of wails and triumphant cries went up from the crowd. The blindfold was removed, but Mary kept her eyes closed, lashes still against her cheeks. "Take her to Widow Jensen's house," the Reverend ordered. "Prepare the body for burial." "And what of her child?" Henry Simmons asked, voice breaking. "Should we not try to save it?" "Wait," Viola commanded, approaching Mary's prone form. "I want to be certain." She knelt beside Mary, placing her ear against Mary's chest. Finding no heartbeat, she straightened, but then paused, eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Her eyelids moved," she hissed. "I saw them twitch." "It's just death spasms," Gerald Thompson said dismissively. "I've seen it before in drowning victims." "No." Viola insisted, her face inches from Mary's. "Something's not right." She reached for a nearby knife. "Cut the child out. At least it might live." "Viola." The Reverend pulled his wife back, horrified. "That's barbaric. She's hiding something." Viola snarled, struggling against his grip. "She's tricking you all." "Enough!" the Reverend thundered. "You forget yourself, woman. Return to the church at once." Viola's eyes blazed with fury, but she allowed herself to be led away. Casting one last suspicious glance at Mary, Mary felt herself being lifted onto a board and carried through town. The journey seemed endless, the voices around her gradually fading as the herb's effects deepened. She hovered in a strange twilight state, aware but distant. Finally, she felt herself laid upon a hard surface. Voices murmured around her. Such a tragedy. Someone sighed, Martha Jensen. Pregnant and all. "The Reverend wants her shrouded immediately," another woman said. "I'll fetch clean water and washing cloths." "Such a rush," Martha complained. "Let me at least close her eyes proper. Gives me chills the way she stares." Mary felt gentle fingers pass over her eyelids. Footsteps retreated, a door opened and closed. Moments passed in silence. Then a whisper, "They're gone now. You can breathe." Mary's eyes flew open. White Fawn bent over her, dressed as a town woman, her distinctive features partially concealed by a bonnet. "Quickly," White Fawn urged. "We have little time." Mary drew a desperate breath, her body shuddering as air filled her deprived lungs. She coughed violently, water spilling from her mouth. White Fawn supported her, helping her turn to the side. "The baby," Mary gasped. "Is my baby." White Fawn placed a hand on Mary's stomach, closing her eyes briefly. "The child lives. Strong spirit like mother." Relief flooded through Mary quickly, followed by urgency. "We need to leave. Viola is mad. She believes I'm someone from her past. She killed Thomas deliberately." White Fawn nodded grimly. "I heard her thoughts when she touched you. Her mind twists truth into shapes that serve her hatred." She helped Mary sit up. "Can you walk?" "I think so," Mary said, though her limbs felt leaden. White Fawn reached into a leather pouch, producing a small clay pot. "Fire medicine. When they return, they will find only ashes." She arranged Mary's wet dress on the table and placed the pot beneath it. Then she helped Mary to her feet and guided her toward a back window. They had just reached it when the front door burst open. Mary froze in terror as Viola Ward herself stepped into the room. For one eternal moment, their eyes met Mary's, wide with horror. Viola's narrowing with malicious recognition. Viola began reaching inside her cloak. White Fawn moved with supernatural speed, flinging a handful of powder into the air. It ignited with a blinding flash and acrid smoke that filled the room instantly. "Run!" she hissed, shoving Mary toward the window. Mary scrambled through the opening, landing awkwardly in the alley. White Fawn followed, graceful despite the chaos. Behind them, Viola's screams pierced the air, not pain, but fury and alarm. She saw me. Mary gasped as White Fawn pulled her toward cover. She knows, then we must be swifter than her lies. White Fawn replied, pulling Mary into shadows as townsfolk ran toward Widow Jensen's house, responding to Viola's shouts. They moved through back alleys, Mary struggling to keep pace. Her wet clothes clung to her body, chilling her despite the spring warmth. Twice they had to hide as search parties rushed past Viola's shrill voice directing them, "The witch lives, find her." As they reached the town's edge, shouts and alarm bells rang out behind them. Smoke rose from Widow Jensen's house. The fire medicine had done its work too well. There, White Fawn pointed to a copse of trees where a young Lakota man waited with 3 horses. "Swift Arrow will guide us to safety." With his help, Mary mounted her pregnant body, awkward in the saddle. As they urged the animals into the forest, she looked back once at Clearwater Creek, the town that had welcomed her as a bride, then condemned her as a witch, and now partly burned due to her escape. They rode hard for an hour, following game trails and shallow streams to mask their tracks. Mary clung to the saddle, every jolt sending pain through her exhausted body. The baby had grown active again, kicking vigorously as if protesting this rough treatment. When they finally stopped in a sheltered valley to rest the horses, White Fawn handed her a water skin. "Drink. The herbs must be washed from your body for the child's sake." Mary drank deeply, then asked the question burning in her mind. "Why help me? Why risk yourself for a stranger?" White Fawn was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of old grief. 7 winters passed, I carried a child. Raiders came to our village while the men hunted. They took many lives, including my unborn baby. Her hand drifted to her stomach. The spirits give us chances to heal old wounds by preventing new ones. This is mine. Swift Arrow, who had been scouting behind them, returned at a gallop. "Riders coming," he reported tersely. "Many. With dogs." Mary's heart sank. How we covered our tracks. Not Viola's men. Swift Arrow's set eyes narrowed. "Different. Strangers with guns led by man with eye patch." White Fawn's expression hardened. "Bounty hunters. Word travels fast when rewards are offered." "Rewards," Mary echoed. "For me, for any witch who escapes justice." White Fawn explained grimly. "Such men don't care about truth, only gold." She exchanged rapid words with Swift Arrow, then turned back to Mary. "Change of plan. Swift Arrow will lead them north. You and I go west to high country where dogs lose scent." "They'll catch him," Mary protested. Swift Arrow's face remained impassive. "They catch only my dust," he replied, his English heavily accented but clear. "No horse matches mine for speed." They transferred essential supplies to 2 horses, leaving the 3rd for Swift Arrow. The young warrior nodded solemnly to Mary before mounting. "And may your child know freedom," he said, then wheeled his horse and rode off deliberately, leaving clear tracks. White Fawn guided Mary westward toward rugged foothills. "We climb now. Hard journey for one with child, but necessary." The terrain grew steeper, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses through narrow passes. Mary's legs trembled with exhaustion, but fear of capture drove her onward. By sundown, they had reached a rocky plateau that overlooked the vast expanse they had traveled. In the far distance, riders and dogs moved northward, following Swift Arrow's false trail. "Will he be safe?" Mary asked anxiously. White Fawn nodded. "He leads them to Running Bear's hunting party. 30 warriors who will ensure our pursuers return wiser, if they return at all." They made camp in a sheltered overhang, the small fire carefully placed to minimize visible smoke. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply. White Fawn wrapped a rabbit fur blanket around Mary's shoulders. "Rest now," she said. "Tomorrow we join my people's hunting camp. 2 days further, but safe from those who hunt you." Mary stared into the flames, one hand absently stroking her belly where the baby had finally settled. Will I ever be truly safe? Viola saw me alive. If she convinces others, she may try. White Fawn acknowledged. But who would believe her, a witch who disappeared in smoke and flame, supposedly risen from the dead? Such claims will only mark her as touched by madness, especially when the poison in the stream is discovered. Poison? Mary asked sharply. Before we left, I placed evidence near the water, the same powder used to kill livestock hidden among Viola's possessions. By now, others grow suspicious of her wild accusations. White Fawn's dark eyes reflected the firelight. Sometimes to truly disappear, one must become a ghost story, a tale told to frighten children, not a woman hunted by men with guns. They slept in shifts that night, one always watching while the other rested. Mary's dreams were chaotic images of Thomas trapped in darkness, of Viola's hateful eyes of water closing over her head. Each time terror threatened to overwhelm her, a strange calm would intervene, as if someone stood guard over her unconscious mind. Dawn broke clear and cold. They ate quickly before continuing westward. White Fawn chose paths that minimized climbing for Mary's sake, but the journey remained grueling for her pregnant body. By midday, they reached a high valley, nestled between twin peaks. White Fawn suddenly raised her hand for silence, her head tilted as if listening to sounds beyond Mary's hearing. Something wrong, she whispered, dismounting swiftly. Stay here. She disappeared into the trees with unnerving silence. Mary waited, heart-pounding, one hand on her belly, the other clutching the reins of her nervous horse. Minutes stretched endlessly before White Fawn reappeared, her expression grim. Strangers in our hunting camp, she reported. Not bounty hunters, soldiers, 6 of them. Looking for me? Mary asked, dread coiling in her stomach. No. They seek deserters, they claim. But they would take you back to White Settlement if they found you. Mary's fingers tightened on the reins. What do we do? White Fawn considered for a moment. We go north instead. Longer journey, more dangerous terrain, but safer than soldiers who ask many questions. They altered course, taking a narrow game trail that wound through dense forest. Progress slowed as they navigated increasingly difficult paths. By nightfall, Mary was swaying with exhaustion, her back throbbing with pain. We must stop. White Fawn finally conceded, helping Mary dismount in a small clearing. You need rest, or you'll lose the child. They made a cold camp, not daring to risk a fire so close to the soldiers' patrol route. Mary huddled beneath the rabbit fur blanket, shivering as much from fear as cold. Even the jerky and dried berries White Fawn offered could not ease her growing sense of dread. What if we can't reach your people? She whispered. What if... A twig snapped nearby. Both women froze, White Fawn's hand moving to the knife at her belt. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness between trees. Mary stifled a scream as a figure approached, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with deliberate stealth. White Fawn relaxed, slightly lowering her knife. Grey Wolf, she said softly. You found us. The older man stepped into the faint moonlight, his lined face grave. He spoke rapidly in Lakota, occasionally gesturing toward the south. My people have moved north after soldiers came. White Fawn translated for Mary. He has been tracking us since dawn, worried when we didn't appear at hunting camp. Relief washed over Mary. He can guide us to them. White Fawn nodded. We leave at first light. Sleep now. Grey Wolf will watch. Despite her exhaustion, Mary slept fitfully that night, jolting awake at every sound in the forest. Each time she opened her eyes, she saw Grey Wolf's silhouette steady and vigilant against the star-filled sky. Morning brought renewed determination. With Grey Wolf leading, they made better progress, following hidden trails no white settler would recognize. By mid-afternoon, they crested a ridge, and Mary gasped at the sight below a small encampment of teepees nestled in a protected valley, smoke rising from cooking fires. My people. White Fawn said, a rare smile softening her features. You will be safe here until your child comes. As they approached, children spotted them, first running forward with curious expressions that turned to surprise at the sight of Mary's pale skin and red hair. Adults emerged from teepees, their faces cautious, but not hostile. Grey Wolf addressed the gathered people in their native tongue, occasionally gesturing toward Mary. White Fawn added her own explanation, her voice carrying the tone of one reporting important news. I have told them of Viola's madness and the danger you escaped. White Fawn finally explained to Mary. Grey Wolf says you will stay in my lodge until your child is born, and you are strong enough to determine your path forward. Relief made Mary's knees buckle. White Fawn caught her arm, steadying her. Come, she said kindly. You need rest and proper food. The journey has taken more from you than you realize. That evening, as Mary sat outside White Fawn's teepee watching sunset paint the valley gold, an elderly woman approached. Her silver hair hung in 2 long braids, and her face was a map of wrinkles that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. This is Singing Bird, our medicine woman. White Fawn introduced her. She has brought herbs to strengthen you after your ordeal. Without speaking, the old woman handed Mary a wooden cup filled with steaming liquid that smelled of pine and something sweeter. Mary nodded her thanks and sipped carefully. The tea was bitter, but warming. Tell her I'm grateful, Mary said, for her welcome and her wisdom. As White Fawn translated, Singing Bird's weathered hand reached out to touch Mary's belly. The baby kicked in response, causing the old woman to smile and nod approvingly. Strong spirit, Singing Bird said in halting English. Like river after storm. That night, safe in White Fawn's lodge, Mary slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No nightmares disturbed her rest, no fear jarred her awake. Whether from exhaustion or the protective presence of her new allies, she found peace that had eluded her since Thomas's death. Miles away, Clearwater Creek faced its own turmoil. The fire at Widow Jensen's had spread to 3 adjacent buildings before being contained. In the chaos following Mary's disappearance and the apparent supernatural conflagration, Jacob Miller had taken water samples from the stream to the assayer in the next town. The results confirmed his suspicions: high concentrations of arsenic, likely from mining runoff, deliberately channeled into the water. Further investigation revealed that the mine where Thomas Caldwell died was partially owned by Reverend Ward through a complex arrangement of proxy investors' information Thomas had been close to uncovering before his accident. When confronted with this evidence, William Parker remembered seeing Viola near the stream multiple times, carrying what she claimed were laundry supplies. A search of the Ward residence uncovered a locked box containing arsenic powder identical to that found near the stream. The town council convened in emergency session. As accusations mounted, Viola burst into the meeting, still raving. That Mary was alive, that she had escaped with Indian help, that witchcraft explained everything. Her increasingly unhinged behavior, combined with the mounting evidence of poisoning, led to her confinement pending examination by a doctor. By the time he arrived, 3 days later, Viola had descended into paranoid raving, alternately confessing to numerous poisonings and claiming supernatural persecution. The doctor's diagnosis was conclusive. The Reverend's wife suffered from dangerous delusions requiring institutional care. Reverend Ward, his reputation in tatters, accompanied his wife to an asylum in Denver, never to return to Clearwater Creek. Justice had come, albeit imperfectly, and too late for Mary to witness. 3 months passed in the Lakota camp each day, bringing Mary new strengths and challenges. Her body recovered from the ordeals she had endured, and the baby grew active, sometimes kicking so forcefully that White Fawn could see the movement through Mary's buckskin dress. Every morning, Mary accompanied Singing Bird to gather medicinal plants, learning their names in the Lakota language. In the afternoons, she helped the women with food preparation, sewing, and other tasks that didn't require advanced language skills. At first, many in the camp had been standoffish, eyeing her with understandable suspicion. But her obvious gratitude and willingness to work gradually softened their attitudes. The children were quicker to accept her, finding her red hair fascinating and her attempts to speak their language entertaining. One woman, however, remained coldly distant. Eagle Feather, whose son had been killed by white settlers the previous year, made her hostility plain, turning away whenever Mary approached and speaking sharply to any children who showed curiosity about the outsider. As Mary's time drew near, Singing Bird began preparing her for childbirth, showing her breathing techniques and positions that would ease the baby's passage. The old medicine woman prepared special teas and massage oils, treating Mary's impending delivery as a sacred event, rather than the dangerous ordeal most settler women feared. One evening, when Mary's discomfort had grown particularly acute, White Fawn suggested they walk to a nearby spring known for its healing properties. The summer twilight lingered, painting the valley in soft purples and golds as they followed a narrow path through flowering meadows. "I've been having dreams," Mary confessed as they walked slowly. "Strange ones, clearer than ordinary dreams." White Fawn gave her a sidelong glance. "What kind of dreams?" "I see Clearwater Creek, but changed. I see Viola in a place with barred windows." Mary paused, one hand supporting her lower back. "And I see Mrs. Fletcher teaching children about plants. Is that really happening, or just my hopes taking shape in sleep?" "Dreams can be many things," White Fawn replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes just mind's wanderings, sometimes messages from spirits. I have walked to Clearwater Creek in spirit form. What you see matches truth. Justice has come in its own way." "So Viola has been exposed?" Mary asked. "Yes." Her mind broke under weight of her crimes. "The town knows now that you were innocent, that she poisoned the stream and arranged your husband's death. The news brought complex emotions relief, that her name had been cleared, grief that the vindication came too late to save her original life, satisfaction that Viola had faced consequences, and lingering anger that Thomas's murderer would never face proper justice. Could I go back? The question slipped out before Mary had fully formed the thought. White Fawn stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "You could. But what would you return to a town that condemned you once could do so again?" Her expression softened. "Besides, your water broke 300 steps back. This child comes tonight." Mary glanced down in shock to see liquid trickling down her legs. "How did you know before I did?" "Dreamwalker sees more than most," White Fawn said, supporting Mary as the first contraction seized her. "Come. Singing Bird prepares already." The birth that followed was long and difficult. For hours Mary labored in White Fawn's lodge, attended by Singing Bird, White Fawn, and surprisingly Eagle Feather, who had appeared unannounced with special birthing herbs. When dawn broke, Mary's strength was flagging, but the baby had not yet descended enough for delivery. "A walk," Singing Bird instructed. "Movement will help baby find path." Supported between White Fawn and Eagle Feather, Mary circled the interior of the lodge, pausing to lean against them when contractions seized her body. The women murmured encouragement, their voices steady and sure, even as Mary's resolve wavered under the onslaught of pain. "I can't," she gasped after a particularly intense contraction. "I'm too tired." "You can and will," Eagle Feather replied firmly, the first English words Mary had heard from her. Every mother thinks she cannot continue, then finds strength for one more push, then another. This is woman's power. The unexpected support gave Mary renewed determination. When Singing Bird checked her progress again and announced it was time, Mary nodded grimly, prepared to face whatever came next. Kneeling on a soft bed of furs, supported from behind by White Fawn, Mary pushed when instructed, breathing through the overwhelming sensations. Just when she thought she had reached the limits of her endurance, a different pressure built, then released in a rush of fluid and movement. Crying filled the lodge, strong, indignant wails announcing a new life's arrival. "A daughter," White Fawn announced, tears evident in her voice. "You have a daughter, Mary." Singing Bird cleaned the infant efficiently before placing her on Mary's chest. Exhausted beyond words, Mary gazed down at her child, pink-faced eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in lusty protest at her abrupt entrance into cold, bright existence. "Hello, little one," she whispered, marveling at tiny fingers and toes. "You made it. We made it." The baby gradually quieted against her mother's warm skin, instinctively nuzzling toward nourishment. With White Fawn's gentle guidance, Mary positioned her daughter to nurse for the first time. "Strong spirit," Eagle Feather observed, watching the newborn's determined feeding. "Good sign." Later, when mother and child had been cleaned and settled on fresh bedding, White Fawn asked, "What will you name her?" Mary looked down at her sleeping daughter, fair-skinned like herself, but with a shock of dark hair that hinted at Thomas's coloring. In that moment, the perfect name came to her. "Hope," she said softly. "Her name is Hope." White Fawn smiled approvingly. "Good name. In our way, she would be Wawachinya." "Mawawachinya," Mary repeated carefully. Hope in 2 languages for a child of 2 worlds. That evening, as Mary dozed with Hope nestled against her, White Fawn sat nearby, keeping watch over the new mother and child. The connection between them had deepened through the shared experience of the birth, transforming what had begun as rescue into genuine kinship. Outside the lodge, drums began to beat, a celebration of new life, joining the community, regardless of the circumstances of its arrival. The rhythmic pulse matched the beating of Hope's tiny heart against Mary's chest, a promise of continuity in a world of constant change. 5 months passed. Winter arrived, early bitter cold descending before the last autumn leaves had fallen. The Lakota moved their camp to a more sheltered location in a valley protected from the worst winds, where game remained accessible even in deep snow. Hope thrived despite the harsh conditions, growing into a content, curious infant who watched the world with eyes that seemed to absorb everything. At 5 months old, she had Thomas's dark hair and Mary's green eyes. Mary's days fell into a rhythm dictated by her daughter's needs and her growing responsibilities within the community. She continued to work alongside Singing Bird, whose health had begun to decline with the onset of winter. As winter deepened, news occasionally reached the camp through traders from other bands. Some of this news concerned Clearwater Creek, filtered through multiple tellings, but still recognizable to Mary. Town changed much. White Fawn reported one evening, returning from a council meeting where a trader had shared information. "Mrs. Fletcher, your friend started school for children, teaches about plants and healing." Some people left town after truth about Viola emerged. Others stayed, trying to rebuild trust. "And Viola?" Mary asked hesitantly. "Died in asylum." White Fawn replied simply. Her mind never healed. Mary nodded silently, uncertain how to feel. There was justice in Viola's fate, yet no true satisfaction. Nothing that could restore Thomas to life or undo the trauma she had endured. As winter strengthened its grip, Mary began contemplating her long-term future. One night, as Hope slept peacefully in her cradleboard, Mary broached the subject with White Fawn. "I've been thinking about what happens next, for Hope and me." White Fawn looked up from the moccasin she was mending. "What thoughts come to you?" "I'm grateful beyond words for the sanctuary your people have provided." Mary began carefully. "But I wonder if staying permanently is truly best for Hope. She deserves to know both sides of her heritage." "You consider returning to white settlements?" White Fawn asked. "That are not Clearwater Creek," Mary clarified quickly. "But perhaps a larger town further east, where I could establish myself as a widow with healing skills. A place where Hope could learn to navigate both worlds as she grows." To Mary's relief, White Fawn nodded with understanding. "I have seen this coming in my dreams. Your path and Hope's crossing between worlds, building bridges where others see only walls." Throughout winter and into early spring, Mary prepared for an eventual departure, though without setting a specific date. She worked with White Fawn to compile a comprehensive record of the herbal knowledge she had gained, using precious paper and ink obtained through trade. As spring's first warmth began melting the deep snows, a trading party returned with news of a growing settlement called New Haven, some 100 miles east. Unlike many frontier towns, New Haven had been founded by a diverse group, including several educated women who had established a school and small infirmary. They seek healer with knowledge of local plants, the returning trader reported. Current doctor knows Eastern medicines, but not Western remedies. The information seemed almost providential. Mary discussed it extensively with White Fawn, weighing the potential benefits against the inevitable challenges of reintegrating into white society. I would not be completely alone, she reasoned. If these women have already established themselves professionally, there might be more acceptance of a widow supporting herself through healing work. White Fawn agreed. Better to go where paths already exist than try to create new one alone. Her expression turned mischievous. Besides, I can visit in dreams, and perhaps sometimes in person when trading parties travel that direction. As spring advanced and wildflowers began carpeting the valley, final preparations were made. A small party would escort Mary and Hope to within safe distance of New Haven, close enough to ensure their security on the final approach, but not so close as to create uncomfortable questions about her association with the Lakota. On the eve of their departure, the camp held a ceremony that Mary had not anticipated. Standing Bear called the community together around the central fire, where Hope was formally given a Lakota name to complement her English one, Wawachinya Waste. The chief pronounced solemnly. Good Hope. She carries both names, both spirits, both strengths. He placed a small necklace of carved bone and beads around the child's neck. With this, she will always remember her Lakota family, always find welcome among us. Most poignant was Eagle Feather's goodbye. The woman who had once been most hostile to Mary's presence now pressed a small bundle into her hands. For the child, she said in her limited English. Medicine bundle, protection. Mary recognized the profound significance of the gift, a sacred object normally passed down through family lines. Thank you, she whispered, deeply moved. That night, after Hope had fallen asleep, Mary and White Fawn sat by their lodge fire for the last time. Neither spoke for a long while, the weight of impending separation heavy between them. Finally, Mary broke the silence. I don't know how to thank you. For my life. For Hope's life. White Fawn's smile held both sadness and serenity. No thanks needed between sisters of spirit. Our paths joined for purpose, now separate for new purposes, but remain connected always. Will you be all right? Mary asked. After we leave, I will continue as before. White Fawn replied simply, following spirit path, helping where needed. She took Mary's hand, her expression turning serious. But remember this warning, the woman who hated you is gone, but her poison remains in minds she twisted. If strangers with cold eyes come asking about red-haired healer with dark-haired child, trust your instincts and run. The warning sent a chill down Mary's spine. You've seen something. Only possibilities, not certainties, White Fawn assured her. Many paths branch from each moment. Choose those with light, avoid shadows of fear or greed. Dawn brought the practical bustle of final departures. Supplies were checked, Hope was bundled warmly, and the small escort party prepared their horses. Standing at the edge of the camp, Mary took one last look at the place that had been her sanctuary and salvation. The landscape would remain etched in her memory, the sweeping valley, the protective mountains, the vast sky that seemed to touch the earth at the horizon. White Fawn stood tall beside her. Hope balanced on her hip for a final embrace. Remember, the Dreamwalker said softly, no matter what others say, you are not running from the past now. You are walking toward the future Hope's future. Mary nodded, too emotional for words. She took her daughter from White Fawn's arms, kissing the woman's cheek in farewell, before mounting the horse provided for her journey. As the small party rode away, Mary allowed herself one backward glance. White Fawn stood watching her slender figure silhouetted against the rising sun, one hand raised in blessing or farewell, perhaps both. Hope secure in the carrier before Mary followed her mother's gaze and waved enthusiastically. Ate, she called goodbye in Lakota, followed immediately by bye-bye in English. Mary smiled through her tears at this perfect encapsulation of her daughter's dual heritage. "That's right, little one," she murmured. "You carry both worlds with you always." The journey to New Haven took 6 days, following routes carefully chosen to avoid established settlements and military patrols. Swift Arrow led the escort party, his keen eyes constantly scanning for potential dangers. On the final morning, they crested a hill to see New Haven spread below them in a fertile valley, a modest collection of buildings surrounded by newly planted fields. A central building with a small steeple suggested community priorities different from Clearwater Creek, where the church had dominated all else. "This is where we leave you," Swift Arrow said, reining in his horse. "Follow that road. Tell them you are widow from Eastern Territories seeking new start." Mary nodded, suddenly nervous. "Thank you for your protection. Please tell White Fawn." She paused, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Tell her we carry her in our hearts." Swift Arrow nodded solemnly. "She knows. She walks with you even now in spirit form." He touched his chest. Strong connections do not break with distance. With a final farewell, the escort party melted back into the forest, leaving Mary and Hope to approach New Haven alone. Mary straightened her borrowed dress, simple but respectable clothing, acquired through trade specifically for this moment, and urged her horse forward. As they neared the town outskirts, a woman working in a vegetable garden spotted them and waved. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked dark hair and a practical demeanor. "Oh, hello there," the woman called, setting down her tools and approaching. "Are you looking for someone in particular?" Mary drew a deep breath. "Good morning. I'm Mary Caldwell, and this is my daughter Hope. I'm a healer by training, newly widowed. I heard New Haven might need someone with knowledge of local plants and remedies." The woman's face lit with interest. "Indeed we do. I'm Catherine Wells, one of the town founders. Our doctor knows little of herbal treatments." She studied Mary curiously. "Where do you come from, if I may ask?" "Pennsylvania originally." Mary replied, the carefully prepared answer coming easily. "My husband and I were homesteading further west until his death in a mining accident last year." Catherine's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss. It's not easy being alone with a child in these territories." Her gaze lingered on Hope's unusual necklace. "She's beautiful. What interesting beadwork reminds me of Lakota craftsmanship." Mary tensed slightly. "It was a gift from a trader. Said it would bring good fortune." Catherine nodded, but something in her eyes suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Well, then you must come meet the town council immediately. We've been searching for someone with your skills for months." As they walked toward town, Hope reached up to touch the Lakota amulet around her neck, then the locket containing a small sketch of Thomas that Mary had managed to save. The child smiled, content in the knowledge beyond her years, but somehow understood nonetheless that she belonged fully to both worlds, limited by neither. Catherine Wells continued speaking as they walked. "You should know, Mary, that New Haven is different from most frontier settlements. Many of us came west fleeing prejudice or seeking freedom to live according to our convictions." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Some of our founders have connections with native peoples that other towns might find controversial." Mary's step faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" Catherine smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "I mean that we recognize wisdom and humanity come in many forms. My late husband was Shoshone. Our school teacher lived with the Cheyenne for 7 years after being captured as a child chose to stay until soldier raids forced her people to surrender. She glanced significantly at Hope's amulet. Your daughter's protection bundle marks her as someone honored by the Lakota. Such things are noticed by those who know their meanings. Relief washed over Mary in a powerful wave. I'm saying that in New Haven, your connection to the Lakota won't be held against you, nor will it need to remain a secret. Catherine's expression grew serious. Not everyone feels as we do, of course. Traders, soldiers, officials who pass through better, they believe the story you've prepared. But among our core community, truth is valued above comfortable fictions. Above them, a hawk soared on thermal currents, its wings spread wide against the endless blue sky. Mary pointed it out to Hope, who watched in wonder as the magnificent bird circled once above them, before heading west toward distant mountains and a valley where a Lakota Dreamwalker smiled in her sleep. Her spirit momentarily returned from its journey of watchful protection. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, prejudices to overcome, careful navigation between worlds. But Mary faced them now, not as a frightened widow fleeing persecution, but as a woman transformed by adversity into something stronger. A bridge builder, a healer in more ways than one. A mother determined to create a world where her daughter could embrace all aspects of her heritage with pride. The wheels of the journey had come full circle. What had begun in lightning and terror had transformed through courage and unexpected friendship into hope. And hope herself, named in English for her mother's deepest wish in Lakota, for her adopted people's greatest strength, giggled, suddenly reaching toward New Haven with perfect trust that whatever came next, she would face it wrapped in the protective love of many worlds.